VOD stuff. But we are just testing out Twitch VODs. So that's really all I'm doing. Let me pin that. Alright. And so what we're gonna do is literally anything. There's not much. Okay, this is some creepy music, isn't it? Never gonna see because I have a lot of unused projects. There you go. Yes, it looks very blurry, but 3D kind of. You can see, you can kind of tell that it's 3D, right? You know, that. The line where my cursor is. See how it shifts? That's 3D. Okay, I want people to know that I can kind of make 3D games, except it's not actually 3D at all. It's just a bunch of costumes. Stuff just to get some stuff done. Hey, if you made it this far into the video, why don't you consider liking and subscribing on my YouTube channel? Because it's not even really 3D. Oh, that's terrible MIDI. And what I'm doing here is realize how I did this, because you might think that's automatic. It's not, because the way normal slopes work is that whenever you hit a wall, it stops you. So you hit a wall, it stops you. But the problem is simple. It's that you hit a wall, but the wall is slanted. And the wall is actually just a small incline. You should be able to walk up that incline, but you can't. You have to jump up it, which is not good. So in the code here, what I've done is somewhere. Let me change the color mode to high contrast. I prefer it in every way, but over somewhere where it does the player Y movement, it just repeats 7, so it has a maximum of 7 Y, which is actually, I think, let me increase that to 8, because sometimes slopes can be kind of bad, but the main problem I have is with this, is with that bridge there, because it goes down, but what happens is that whenever moving sideways, it first checks to, if you're in a wall, it will normally move you out, but it first checks if it says if touching player hitbox. That's only because after multiple iterations you still don't want it to go up, but it's just gonna move it up if it's touching the player hitbox, which at the start it always is, so it's gonna do that. And if it still is, it's gonna do that, but if it's not, it's just gonna go to the next thing. So what it's doing is if you're here on this here, you hit the slope, instead of stopping, it says, hey, move up, and then it does. And it says, are you still touching it? And then, if so, repeat it, and it's going to repeat 8 times. And if it's still not, it moves down, and then it does that. So, that's what it is. Technically, could create a variable to do this, and that would, in theory, make it much easier, but in practice, you don't really need to change the slopes, because they're slopes. Yeah. That's all this is. Actually.